quickly introduce Thomas Stark, who completed his training with ACS last year, now flying a Twin Otter commercially. Welcome to the chat, Thomas.
Thanks, Graham.
And we've also got Jack Osterberg, who completed his training last year as well, and is flying Embraer 145. Is that right, Jack?
Yep. Why did I choose ACS at Perth? Which is quite a common question. I did quite a lot of looking around before I started. Looked at schools down south, a couple of schools abroad as well. Looked at the difference between modular and integrated as well. After about a year of looking around, decided upon ACS, realised that the financial burden of going into an integrated course wasn't particularly worth it, given the risks and stuff inherent. Looking around modular schools and stuff, I hadn't actually heard of ACS until towards the end of my search, when I was speaking to a friend who'd completed his training just as the new management had come in and kind of bought it over, started introducing new aircraft and rebranding it. Had a little look around and pretty much immediately knew that it was the school that I wanted to complete my training with.
A typical day, I did my CPL IR ACS, so you kind of start off, head in, have a chat to your instructor and see what the plan is for that day. You'll kind of have a rough idea. There's a course outline, and so you're expected to complete the reading needed for the next day's lessons. After that, you'll go in, have a chat, have a brief, go through any kind of points you need to in order to get ready for whether it be a sim session or actually going out to the aircraft. If you're going flying, go check the NOTAMs, check the weather, and head out. And for an IR sortie, might be 2 hours. You might do a trip to, say, Prestwick and back, go shoot an ILS there, and then come back and do some different approaches at Dundee, which is very handy because there's lots of airports close by to Perth itself. Then a break for lunch, and if you've got time, more in the afternoon of the same.
From the AMI-IR, would you suggest any pre-reads? I just kind of read over some of the caps, particularly 413 for the radio stuff, because that's the stuff that I struggled with the most, was the different phraseologies and the things that they would be looking at. And I also read back over some ATPLs, particularly radio nav, ops, that kind of stuff, to go over the legalities of it, the limitations. I don't know if you had any other different pre-reads, Thomas.
The only thing I'd add was the CAA standards documents. If you can kind of bear to trudge through them, there is some really good stuff in there, especially for the CPL and the IR tests. Knowing exactly what they're looking for, I found was very helpful. Whilst completing your CPL IR, was there much work to do at home? It really depends on how you're getting on with the course. Some people find the CPL a lot easier than the IR, and you have to spend a lot of time going over map work that they did for PPL. There's a bit of work, especially on holds, hold entries, that sort of stuff. But maybe kind of even an hour a night just going over what you've done during the day.
Yeah, and adding to that as well, I found that I spent a lot of time at night reading over the plates and kind of having a mental picture in my head of what we're going to do the next day, because you generally know what you're going to do the next day, whether it's going to be you're going to go to Dundee in the simulator and do an NDB approach and some holds. So I generally read over it so that there's not any gotchas that are going to catch me out, because there's in every plate there's a little something written somewhere that if you've not had the experience, the time to read it, you're going to fall into that trap. And as well, instructors are good at pushing you, so every so often, the instructors will turn around and just ask you a question, and if you don't get it right, it's on you to go home and read up on that subject.
What's the DA42 like to fly? Great piece of kit. It's so much fun, and it really prepares you for going into an airline. It's all glass cockpit. It's got a basic autopilot as well. So it really gives you a good step up from, say, a Warrior or a Cessna. It helps prepare you for the APS, and then nothing's really a surprise once you get to an airline assessment, once you've flown the Diamond. It's just really good fun. I had a great time in it.
What's a typical day like working for an airline? Normally you report an hour before your departure, but generally we're all there an extra 15 minutes before that. Look at the weather, NOTAMs, serviceability, decide how much fuel we're going to take. Once that's done, we'll phone the handling agent, tell them how much fuel we need, find out where the aircraft's parked, walk down to the aircraft. For us anyway, on the end where the captain does the first walk around of the day, regardless of who's actually operating the flight. First officer and myself will do the first flight of the day checks, which basically just gets everything tested in the flight deck, everything's set up for departure. Captain will come back in, he'll give me a tech log brief, and then we'll get checklists done, passengers start boarding, liaise with the dispatcher, and then after that, once everyone's on, we'll get the doors closed, push back, and we can do anything from a 2 to at most a 6-sector day really. The most I've had is 5 sectors in a day. It can vary from a little quick 40-minute jaunt up to Stornoway to an hour and a half to 2 hours to Dusseldorf and back. Fill in the paperwork as we go through the day. Captain generally will take it home or we'll do it on his iPad, put the figures in, and then that's it. Generally quite sociable, at least anyway. Loganair earliest start is 5:30 and latest finish, like I say, has been midnight, which is pretty handy. Don't know if you've got any differences there, Thomas.
No, just more sociable hours actually. Our earliest starts, I think earliest report's 6:15 and latest finish is about 7 o'clock, so it's even more sociable. I lived at home for most of my training until the CPL MEIR, when it really is a full-time course. You need to be quite close because driving back and forth from Edinburgh just isn't kind of feasible. Jack and I actually shared a house together for 3 months. There's quite a few captains for airlines that are happy to rent out rooms in Perth, so that's what we did.
Did you do your hour building in the UK, and did the weather affect how quickly you could achieve this? I did all my hour building up in Perth. I know Loganair in particular will take preference to people who trained and flew in Scotland because of the adverse or the conditions that can be so changeable, and balancing it with doing ATPLs at the same time meant that if it was rubbish, well, you just cracked on and studied, and if it was great, then that would be your day off. So I think it worked well.
Yeah, I'd echo that as well.
What was the most challenging part of your training? For me, to be honest, it would probably have been the ATPLs and the theory side of it. I always found the actual flying bit to be so enjoyable that it was easy to get through the kind of the hard bits, but the ATPL theory was pretty tough. What was the entry requirements to ACS?
We now have a pre-entry assessment that includes an online psychometric test and an airline-style Skype interview, and also a simulator assessment. So you need to be able to pass that to either join our fast-track course or complete your commercial training with ACS. The requirements for the fast-track course are you need to be 18 years old, and you need to have a Class 1 medical. The next question, as someone younger, is there anything you'd recommend I should be doing now?
They're trying to take a job in an airport. Something didn't harm me. It was great for getting connections and learning little tidbits here and there that when I went to the interview and stuff, it gave me a kind of a wider view of how the actual industry worked and what to expect. But really just doing as much as you possibly can. I don't know how old you are, but when I was 13 I joined the Air Cadets. And I did that until I was 17, and it was brilliant. It was so much fun, and I learned so much about so many different subjects and different kind of skills and stuff like that. Really, the best advice I'd give is just do stuff that interests you, because ultimately, if for whatever reason you need to do something other than flying, if you've got school subjects that relate to something that really interests you outside of it, then that's a great backup to have. For me, I was just really lucky, right place, right time. I finished at SimTech at the start of August. Got my application sent to Loganair the day that I finished, and the certificate was in hand. I did the same with a few other airlines, and I heard back from Loganair within about a week, and then 2 weeks later I had an interview, was successful, and then a further 2 weeks later I was on my induction course, and then the next week I was in Gatwick for type racing. So for me it was just right place, right time to get a quick interview date. The interview itself was challenging, but I prepared hard for it. And the great thing about ACS is that some of our instructors are pilots for Loganair and other airlines, so you get a lot of insight. Because ACS is also kind of like a little family feel. People who do pass through and then get jobs on airlines are happy to help people.
So I finished at SimTech in May of last year, and 2 weeks after that I was offered a job at a large European airline that flies 737s with a start date in about August. For one reason or another that fell through. About a month after that I got an interview with Loganair, and was offered either you can start flying the ATR in January, or you can jump on the Twin Otter and start in 2 weeks. Obviously I took that. So it's not always kind of the journey you're expecting to go on, but there are jobs out there. Where did you complete the ATPL exams? If you're talking about providers, I did mine through CATS Aviation. I did distance learning, and I completed all my exams down at Gatwick, because that was quite handy for me. But Jack, you did yours in-house at Pathway.
Yeah, I did mine at Pathway, and it was great. The instructors were brilliant. The materials, Pad Pilot, you've got a book on your iPad, so it gets updated when the questions change, the theory changes. You don't need to go and buy a whole load of new books. It's just sent straight away. As soon as feedback comes back from the exams, Pad Pilot are quick to try and get anything relevant added in order to help your learning. The instructors themselves are great. They're really experienced. Ex-RAF and ex-airline pilots are great. The facilities were brilliant as well. Nice big classroom. People that I did my ground school with, I'm still friends with now. Talk to them almost every day, if not every week.
So how do you find doing the ATPL's long distance? Tough, really tough. I wasn't someone who enjoyed school, so the prospect of doing 14 more exams didn't fill me with glee. But it was tough but manageable. I worked at the airport like Jack whilst doing my ATPLs, and you come home from a 12-hour shift and do a few hours studying here and there. It was tough, but it was manageable. They're not as bad as everyone says they are. It's just the content itself isn't particularly difficult. It's just the sheer volume that you have to remember. So if I can do it, I'm sure anybody else could. I've heard the DA42 sim is similar to the aircraft. Great. It's one of the massive selling points that drew me to ACS, that doing your IR sims in the same aircraft just gives you such great continuity. And it's not a surprise. You don't have to learn two aircraft or learn even kind of a generic sim. Just being able to go in and do exactly what you've done in the sim in the aircraft, it helps so much. How does life as a pilot compare to what you're expecting? It's great. It's a great job. It doesn't feel like it's something you should be being paid for, because it's really good fun. Don't mind me asking roughly how much is the ACS modular training cost? This would be excluding the PPLs I'm currently working towards at Carlisle. I think Graham, you'd probably be the best person if you don't mind.
£45,000. That includes your hour building, the night rating, your CPL, your MEP and your IR. There would be additional costs on top of that for skills tests, and there would be a good share to pay to the CAA for your exams. So from a budgetary perspective, you're maybe talking to good to maybe budget about £55,000 in total to complete the training after CPL.
What was the total duration and total cost of the training, start to finish, including your type rating? Total duration for myself and Jack was about 2 years to 2.5 years.
I'm bonded for 3 years, but I didn't have to pay any money, so I have to pay if I leave within 3 years, but there's no plans for me to do.
How different are the PPL exams to the ATPL exams? There's just so much content to cover, but the kind of the difficulty isn't really stepped up too much. It's just the sheer volume of it. Obviously the subjects you'll do better and worse at. I mean, I wasn't a big fan of General Navigation and quite a few of the systems ones, but stuff like radio nav's quite easy for me. So it just depends how you fared with the PPL exams. If you found those quite easy, then the ATPLs shouldn't be too big of a hurdle.
What is the student to instructor ratio for CPL and IR training? It was 2 students to 1 instructor, which was brilliant because you could sit in the briefings, you could get almost twice as much learning done, because if the other person had questions or whatever, you could listen to that and hear it. And then when they go in the sim, you can sit in the right-hand seat because the instructor sits behind at the module, and you can watch them do it, and then they can watch you do it, and you can chat and learn from each other. And then when you go and fly the aircraft, you can sit in the back and watch them do it as well. So, not only are you getting to do it, but you get to watch it either first or second and really refine the knowledge. So I thought it was a perfect ratio of way to do it.
Roughly how many weeks did it take you to complete a CPL IR ACS flying for weather? So I started in January of last year, and it took me, I think we took one delay for one day because of weather, and that was it. So I did mine quite quickly. It took 6 or 7 weeks for the IR, an MEP, and then another 2 or 3 for the CPL. So it can all be done very quickly, weather permitting. And if I did it in the middle of winter and only lost one day. Most of the IR is done in the sim, so you don't really lose too many days.
Well, thank you very much for everyone coming on. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Jack.